Helen from Dextrous, and I'm going to be taking you through a series of short videos now to explain how to make my project to stitch some spring bulbs. So first of all, I'm just going to show you what you're going to need to do the project. You need 2 pieces of card. This one is about, it's an A5 piece, so half a side of A4, and this is another contrasting piece which is it's 6 centimeters this way, so it's just slightly more than 1/3 of the depth. So this piece measures 21 centimeters by 14 centimeters, and this piece is 21 centimeters long and 6 centimeters deep. You don't have to use a piece of brown card, or it could be paper or something. It does make an extra thickness to stitch through, but that's not a problem. But it's just to give a bit of contrast, because this is going to be the area underneath the bulbs. So this is the soil. So you could just as easily colour it, or just stitch it onto the plain background. You also need the copy of the pattern, which is available in the free download, and printed out onto half A4. So again, you see this is, in fact, I've trimmed it very slightly smaller than my card, just so that it doesn't hang over the edges when we're stitching. And also then the threads, the needle, as we've discussed previously, and my bodger to make the holes. So I've chosen some yellow, some spring green, sort of a pinky reddy brown for the bulbs, and then a bit of orange to highlight the centre of the daffodil. The other thing we're going to need for when we actually punch the card is, it's not very pretty to look at, but it's just something to protect your surface. I use a couple of old placemats, which are quite thick and spongy. And these are very good too, old padded envelopes, so I normally put a couple of those like that. It's good if the top surface is flat, but other than that, it's just to protect where you're working. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to prepare our card. I've already stuck the brown section onto the bottom of the white card. I just use some double-sided tape, because I find that best, because it's not wet, it doesn't warp the card or anything. The only thing I would be careful is to put the glue away from the edges you're going to stick, because if there's sticky tape underneath these parts, it's going to catch on your needle, and that makes your needle sticky. So I've put a bit of tape around the edges here to stick the pattern on the back as well. So obviously the pattern, we work from the pattern side, and then this side will be the finish, so it will be the mirror image of what we're working. So with this pattern it doesn't matter, but sometimes if you're using text, you have to make sure you've put your text the other way around. So to make the holes, as we discussed just now, if you have a piece of some cork or some foam type flat surface, and then a padded envelope, that's absolutely perfect. That will make sure that you don't make holes in your surface. Although I think you can see this is an old school desk, so actually a few more holes and a bit more graffiti won't make too much problem. So you can see on the pattern, I've just marked some little cross pieces. So these are where we're going to make the holes. Obviously, if there are lines that join together, there's a hole there, and then otherwise the holes are fairly equally spaced. Sometimes if to make a curve, they're a bit closer together, but generally they're about, or I'd say about 5-6 mil apart. You can stitch closer, but you have to be careful that you don't rip the card, and if they're too far apart, then afterwards you don't get a good shape. So we're going to take out the bodger that we made in the previous video and just aim it over the end of the thing. Oops, my table's got a wobble, and push down. Easy peasy. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time, but it is quite therapeutic. You can see actually even through the double thickness of card, it wasn't a problem. Sometimes it's worth going back through from the other side as well to make a nice clean hole. So there we go. Whether the needle's coming from the reverse or the front of the design, it's just as easy to pass through the hole. So I'm going to carry on and do that, and then we can start with our stitching. So we have our card now, and you can see I've punched all of the pattern. Don't be put off. It looks a bit scary when you just see all the holes like that, but really it is very, very simple to sew. So the first thing we need to do, having threaded the needle, if you need some advice, you can have a look in the separate video. And we're just going to go up and down through the holes. You could just work it in a running stitch, but to get a nice continuous line, the best thing to do is to use backstitch. So we come up onto, this is the right side of the pattern, the right side of the work, and this with the pattern is the wrong side. So any knots and finishing off will be on this side. So we come up through that hole and down here. You can see I'm just starting by working the bulbs, and I'm using this kind of pinky brown colour to make the bulbs. So I've come up back onto the right side. Now I'm going to go back down into the next hole along, but this time I'm just going to go back on myself. So as from now on, each stitch I will work in this direction. So I'll go 2 holes forward and then 1 stitch back, exactly the same as you would stitch a back stitch on fabric. We just work into the holes that we've made in the card. So here we're into that one, and back. You can see I'm not going back into this one because that's already been stitched. I'm going 2 holes that way, and then back 1 hole there. So you can see it gives a nice line of stitching, which makes the outline of our drawing, our picture. And this is thread that's been dyed with natural dyes, so you get a nice of a variation in the colour. It's very subtle, but it gives a nice effect to stitch something natural like the bulbs from the flowers. So I'm going to carry on stitching the bulbs. I'm going to work up here, down, up until I finish this bulb, and then do exactly the same for the other 3 bulbs. It doesn't really matter what order or the direction that you stitch in, it's just in terms of making the most effective use of your thread, really. So for me, I'm going to go up, down, up, down, and then I'll finish off the thread here and start and move to the next thread. You could just pull your thread across, but then you end up with lots of long bits of thread and it can get in a tangle. So when I come to finish my thread, I'll show you what I'll do in a minute. I'll just show you an example, so I'll just do 1 more stitch. So your thread comes out onto this side of the card, and the easiest thing is to just stick a little bit of tape like that, and then so you're about 1 centimetre along, and then just cut the end like that. It just keeps it really, really tidy, and it's really simple to do. And then if I was going to cut it, I would just cut that off and then make a knot and start again somewhere else on the design until I finished stitching all of this colour. Okay, so we can now move on to the next part of the explanation. As you can see, I have now finished stitching the 3 bulbs, and so on the back I'm just going to finish off my thread. So I'm just going to tuck it underneath a couple of these, pull it tight, and then just stick a little bit of tape. Oops. Just to keep it, just make sure that doesn't go across the holes, just to keep that fixed down before I just chop the end. Okay, so all the brown stitching is finished. Now we can move on to the green for the shoots. So I'm going to stitch the 3, as you can see, the 3 bulbs are getting gradually bigger as they grow. So there's the first shoot here, these leaves here, apart from this very top bit, which I'm going to stitch in yellow, and then the leaves for the daffodil when it's finally in flower. So as we did before, I'm going to just take about an arm's length of cotton. Which, obviously it depends on how long your arms are, but that's about 60 centimetres. My needle, holding it between my thumb and my first finger and pushing the needle in. There we go. Tie a little knot. I'll stick a bit of tape as well, but otherwise it tends to pull through. Oops. I never managed to tie 2 knots in the same place, but that doesn't matter. There we go. So then I'm going to stitch this second bit in exactly the same way, and we're just going to carry on using back stitch that we were using before. I'm going to go through here, just catch that under the tape there from the last thread, and then carry on in the same way and work up here, down there, and then back up the top to finish on the point of the leaves. Whoops, of course I get in a tangle. There you go, so that will be the start of our green shoot. Okay, so now you can see that I've stitched the green leaves on the 3 bulbs. So I'm going to stitch the flowers next. And I'm going to start with the centre of the daffodil that's fully in flower. I've decided to use a contrasting colour, which is this orange and yellow mix for the centre, and then I'm going to use yellow, this subtly yellow variation for the outside. So first of all, for the orange, I'm just going to thread my needle. Oops, it's a bit fluffy. To thread today. There we go. And turn over to the back. You can see as I've gone along, I've stuck a little bit of tape over the ends. The green I didn't. The green I've just tucked back through. You can do that too, but I'm going to stick some tape at the end when it's finished, just to keep it nice and tidy. So I just, and for the centre of this flower, you can see it's not stitched in back stitch. And in fact, it's just 3 long stitches which make like a big cross stitch. So I'm going to stitch across, then across that way, and then across that way to make the centre of the flower. So we're here. It's a bit more difficult to tell on here, but you can always check on the back. So then, now I've come up here, I'm going to move around to the next hole there. And diagonally opposite to here. Then move around to the last section. And diagonally opposite again. So now we've got a nice large cross in the centre, which will give the effect of the centre of the flower with the stamens. And now around the edge of the trumpet, if you like, of the daffodil, I'm just going to carry on stitching in the same back stitches we were using before. So up in one hole and back 1 stitch on the front, then forward 1, 2 on the back. You can see we're starting to see the variation now in the thread. So I really love these hand-dyed threads because you get such a pretty colour change, which adds so much to the design. There. So I'm going to finish that, and then I'll change onto the yellow for the outside and the last remaining one. Okay, so the centre of our flower is now stitched. I'm just going to show you how I've changed my thread. I'm just going to loop it a little bit under the back just to make sure. That's what you would do if you were working on a traditional cross stitch pattern. You'd just tuck your thread through the white threads on the back. But I'm just going to pull this straight. I want to make sure just that I avoid any of the holes, because if I stick tape on those, next time I put my needle through, it's going to be sticky, and a sticky needle's no fun. So I'm just going to pull that over here where there's a bit of space and stick it down, and then just trim it off. And then I can start on the yellow in exactly the same way as we did the other ones. I take the orange out, pull myself some yellow thread, so again about an arm's length of thread is plenty. You see, now it's on the card, it's really easy to unwind, and it's not at all tangled. See, I can thread the needle better this time. if it does get fluffy on the end, which is what makes it difficult with this stranded thread, there we go, that was fine. Either trim the fluffy end off or just slightly fold it back a bit. That's a good tip to get it through the needle more easily. But I would definitely recommend using it between your thumb and your first finger. It's by far the easiest way to thread, especially when I don't have my glasses on. So all that remains now is to finish the yellow petals around the edge of the main flower, and also I'm going to put a bit of yellow here on the bulb that's coming through. It will probably be green in reality, but just for the artistic, for the look of the picture, I want to make a bit of yellow peeking through there. So I'm going to stitch that section first. And again, like the others, I've just made a small knot. Let me find where it starts. It starts here. Oops. Pull it through. And then just work the same back stitch. All the way around. As you can see, this is what I really want to show with this project, is that you can make a lovely piece of stitched art with just the simplest of stitches. You don't need to do complicated twisty embroidery stitches to make a piece of stitched art that you can frame and be proud of. So there we go. I'm just going to finish there for the moment and then carry on that, and I'll be back in a minute to show you what it looks like when it's finished.